Greetings and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Conflicted Space EP7. As always with you, I'm Wrath, and let's get right into it. Now this episode is a bit long, and it's been a long time coming. I've had some computer problems and some other issues that have delayed my creation of the next episode and getting it edited and ready for play. So where we left off, we had everything set and going. The Drax Corporation had a base on the moon, and the Ares had a space station, whereas Hexadyne had only gotten the one probe up on a mission to, I believe, Eve. So, since that mission is going to be running very, very long, Hexadyne decided that they were going to go ahead and launch 2 additional probes, one targeted towards Duna and the other targeted towards Jewel, in order for them to maximize their research ahead of time so that they could decide what they wanted to do well in advance. So you're watching an accelerated version of some of these videos because I had about 2 hours of video to try and condense down, and I was able to get it down to about 30 minutes, 34 minutes, 35, somewhere around there. Anyway, so you're watching the second one launching from a second site on Kerbin, because we are using a Kerbin site. And they're both heading off into Kerbin orbit, and I later get them on exit trajectories as things progressed. I didn't keep the footage of that because it was really boring, annoying. But in the meantime, we've got the Drax deployment on the moon, which has run into a couple of problems. When we cut back to it after I had done the update and added some additional mods and made some changes and got some refreshes of the mods, it turned out that the wheels mod that I was using for this particular vehicle wasn't working correctly, and I ended up having to modify the files to correct the issue. But we finally got it working. But one of the things that they discovered early on was that they didn't have the construction facility on board the ship, which was supposed to come along with the ship so that they could construct the various different components that they were supposed to construct on the moon. On top of that, all of the inventories, with the exception of the pilot's, Jebediah's, were empty, which has led Drax to claim that there has been some form of sabotage on their mission, and they're very much noisily and loudly complaining. But Jebediah, unperturbed, has gone ahead and moved their unit to a new location, trying to find the best optimal location for their ships so that they can set up a base. Along with that, they had Drax send up another rocket to the moon, which contained the construction facilities that they could then make use of and modify for their use. And here you see Catrice Kerman getting some of the tools, having gotten some of the tools from Jebediah. She is going ahead and removing the construction unit from the lander and attaching it back over to the command unit. And this is done through the Kerbal attachment system and Kerbal inventory system. But once that's been completed, and they have to maneuver it quite a bit in order to get things close enough that she can make the move. But with that done, they go ahead and begin the process of mining up enough ore and preparing their vehicle to produce the start of their base. Now, I'm not going to lie, this was a bit of a learning curve for me, because interplanetary launch or extraplanetary launch pads is a mod that I've looked at, but I've never really played around with it all that much. And so it took me a while to get everything set up and get the base ready for its beginning. And believe this is where they're should be moving around to try and get everything in position. But with that done, they go ahead and do all the drilling that they need to do in order to refine enough rocket parts to build a launch pad that they can deploy. And so we did end up deploying that, and it's, you know, spawns off the back of the craft. And there were a few outtakes of this where when I tried to deploy the unit the first time, it literally blew everything up. I mean, like the whole command unit exploded. It was a drastic mess. And I even had this issue here where I thought I separated everything, but it was still floating there. And that was because I hadn't released it from the back of the construction unit. So it was still technically just floating there in space on the back of it. Here you can see me trying to figure out what's wrong with this. Why is it floating? And I was also trying to figure out how to get a guy inside of it, because you have to have a Kerbal inside of it. And I knew that there was a door there, but I couldn't figure out how to get a guy in there. But it took me a while to realize that I needed to release the unit, and there you see it gets stuck on the other unit, the little detachable component that I had set on it. And I eventually figured out that I could just make the guy jump and tell him to jump inside. It was a little bit of a pain in the butt, but I got it sorted out. But once this was set up, I eventually moved the vehicle around there I'm trying to knock it free. I'm like, well, maybe if I just jar it, it'll come out. And I ended up having to have Catrice go out there, and it's like, oh, you know, maybe that'll, yep, and that blew it off. And then I open it back up. These little rocket pads are really cool. But this brings me to what I'm planning for the future episodes. Now, I will come to that eventually, but I want to get through all of the stuff that's happened since our last video. Okay, see here, I'm just trying to, I'm like, well, can I get around the other side? Is it, nope, there's no hatch on that side. I'm having this guy try and figure out, I'm like, oh, wait, no, there it is, yep, okay, there he goes, he's inside. And so now I've got that base unit set up, and so I decide that I need to connect these, because all of the mining, the actual launch pad has very limited facilities in terms of what it can store. So in order for it to have access to all of the rocket parts it needs, it has to, like this, I have to move the vehicle closer and connect the two of them, which fortunately the tools and stuff that I left in Jebediah's seat were enough that I could, at the very least, be able to go out and connect these two units together. And here you see me transferring all the tools over to Catrice, because Jebediah can't actually do it because he's not an engineer. Only Catrice is. So she's got to go do the work, and here she jumps off just to show off a little bit. And oh no, I think this is Jebediah planting the flag. It's Jebediah planting the flag for Drax Moon Base 1. And then we should see Catrice, yeah, he goes running back to get back in, and then Catrice is going to jump on out and connect up the ship with the launch pad so that we are able to feed it rocket parts and fuel and such until such time as they can put together some kind of better system. So you see her here using the Kerbal attachment system and Kerbal inventory. So she's opening up her inventory and getting out her wrench so that she can do her work. And you gotta zoom in because, you know, I gotta make sure I put these in the right spot. And definitely, if you haven't used Kerbal attachment system and Kerbal inventory system, I wholeheartedly recommend them. because it's so useful to be able to put together ships in parts and then be able to go in and put together struts and other connections, or even just move around parts. I even experimented briefly with using just that for the orbital construction, of having ships with pre-selected parts already put together. But there's a weight limit on how much an individual Kerbal can maneuver. So after the base was all set up, we cut over to Ares, which is launching their brand new heavy lifter SSTO called the Hermes Mark I. And flying this aircraft is Tomkin Kerman. He is the captain, and he has been trained by Valentina. Indeed, many of their test flights in this vehicle were with Valentina at the helm and Tomkin riding shotgun. And then you see there's a little bit of a hiccup on takeoff, but this craft does have enough power and speed to get up into orbit and still have enough to come back. However, as you'll see in later videos, there's some slight defects in the design, because it does end up having a nearly critical landing. And here I've sped up the footage because I've got the whole launch and flight up to the Wayfarer station. I think I've got this at 4 times acceleration, but you'll see that the ship is really, it's really good at, now I can't claim total, this was my whole design, because I did in fact get inspired by the Jupiter Star design that Theos Human did. This is a smaller, simplified version in a lot of respects, mostly because I'm using tweak scale, so I can adjust parts and I don't have to do the 4 block of 4 Rapier engines that he had set up, and I could instead tweak the size and shape of some of the parts to my needs. But I definitely want to give a shout out to Theos Human. If you haven't watched his channel, you should. He's brilliant with some of this stuff. I constantly love his content. I also watch a bunch of other people. Just about everybody that plays this watches Scott Manley. I can't give enough props to Mr. Manley for being an inspiring person for these kind of videos. But also I watched Macy Dean and many others. Guard, he does a good one. Beardy Penguin, I love his series. But we're going to get this up, and this is of course as it's getting up into its orbital position. But yeah, I saw his design, and his design was much better than mine. But I didn't want to just outright copy his design, and I had other requirements in mind with mine. But it was definitely a good jumping off point for me. So it was, like I said, full props to him for designing the Jupiter Star. I think it's like Mark 15 or whatever. It's like Mark 14 or Mark 15. You can see it in his videos. It's just a beautiful plane, and it doesn't look exactly like mine. His has actually got like these wings with a gap in the middle, so they look like an A-frame on each side of it, which is really just phenomenal looking. But I couldn't replicate that and have a stable flight for my craft, because the weight and flight characteristics for what I'm doing with all the tweak scale and stuff like that is just slightly different enough that it wouldn't hold. So anyway, so we get this up into orbit, and now if you remember, the Wayfarer station is at a 200 kilometer orbit over Kerbin. So This is it flying out, and it's carrying a construction facility, an orbital construction facility, and a supply of rocket parts to be added to the station. However, there's a flaw that I didn't catch when I was putting it all together, which was that the ship itself, the part that we're going to be docking with the station, which is inside the center cargo hold. These are all the Kerbals that are riding along with us. The part that's inside there is supposed to move out of the cargo bay and then position itself and dock with the station. But it has no control. It has no control unit, no probe core or anything. However, Tomkin, being the illustrious and brilliant pilot that he is, instead lined the Hermes up with the station into the docking position that the unit would need, and accelerated the approach of the Hermes before undocking the unit, and then moving the Hermes out of the way. And so you can see here, and I actually time accelerate in-game on this one, you can see that he lined it up just perfectly so that it would come down right on where it was supposed to dock. And so this is a testament to the skill and training of Ares pilots, that even when the mission goes awry, they can still get the job done. As you can see, it's lined up really well, and I'm kind of disappointed with the Wayfarer station, because I had been going for a perfectly circular station, and it's not really circular. It's a fair bit not at all circular. It's like a weird sort of octagon. Well, I don't know what you would want to call it. It's got, you know, straight parts and angled parts, and it's not really... I think I could do better. And you can see sitting there on the bottom part there was supposed to detach when it got into orbit, but there was so much fuel left inside of that. I had way overestimated the necessary fuel, and so it carried a bunch of extra fuel up with it into orbit. And so we're going to actually use that to refuel the Hermes before it returns. So after you see this docked, we'll cut over to after we've docked and refueled the Hermes. And because of the design, and I hadn't really been paying attention, but these docking caps on the outside, which is where I had intended on docking it, are actually junior docking clamps, and the docking port on the top of the Hermes is a standard clampetron or whatever. So it's a standard docking port. So the two of them can't meet. So it's got to dock on one of these ones that's either on the top or the bottom of the ring. And that, of course, because of the size and position of the wings and everything else, and the position of the docking port, makes docking this thing just a bloody nightmare. Because you'll see as we get up into when you see how I end up having to dock it when it cuts over to the other clip, that it was very, very unpleasant to dock this. And I'm not going to lie, I use a lot of MechJeb assistance and Kerbal Engineer and other similar tools to help me get a lot of this stuff done, because by myself I am not that great at it. You know, I mean, I'm getting better, and with practice it's been helpful. But you know, see there I am after the docking and refueling, which was a long, tedious process to pull fuel from all the tanks and move all of the crew, so that only Tomkin and Tiyuki, the co-pilot, are the ones left in the ship. We transferred the 4 scientists and engineers that were to do the construction in the construction module, and then we transferred the 4 passenger Kerbals also into the station, so that they can assist with construction and crew of any vessels that are sent out from this point forward. And of course the station itself is just capable of hosting a enormous amount of crew, and here I am kicking back on its solar panels so that it will be able to power itself when it comes back out of the shadow of the planet. And now it is time for the Hermes to say goodbye and make its flight back to the surface of Kerbin. So you see me here trying to figure out when and where to reverse burn so that the ship can come down at the Kerbal Space Center. And I've got this, again, a lot of this footage I've sped up because the actual amount of video that I had recorded was just shy of 2 hours. It was like 1 hour and 56 minutes through the various parts of this. But one of the problems that I did not account for with the Hermes, at least the Mark I version of the Hermes, I will be designing an updated version of it later. But one of the things that was not accounted for in the Mark I design of the Hermes was the load distribution without its cargo. So as it comes back down, you're going to see that I end up having to maneuver fuel around a whole bunch, and there you can see me trying to lock out some of it to try and keep the weight forward, because what happens is that the center of mass, without the cargo inside, the center of mass suddenly shifts back quite a bit, and as the fuel starts draining out of it, we end up with a ship that is running less and less with a forward weight. And so it becomes more and more unstable as we get closer and closer to the surface. And it doesn't help that my monopropellant is up front as well, so that as it continues to burn monopropellant to try and make adjustments, it's going to lose more and more of its forward weight profile. So we're waiting for us to get down to the atmosphere here, and I did this way more aggressively. I think I actually had like 3 or 4 takes of this where I actually made a mistake and the dang thing just burned up, which, you know, yeah, but it was during like some of the test flights, not during this actual mission, where I burned it up like 2 or 3 times trying to bring it back in. But I knew when I put it up that there was going to be an issue with weight, but I thought I had solved that by, you know, how I was going to move the fuel around, and I had been very much wrong. So here you can see us getting into the atmosphere now. We're getting really fast down, and again, I'm running this at a quite a bit of speed. I think it's ×4 still. But I toy with the idea of just turning the air brakes on all the way, because they do slow it down quite a bit. But you'll see that those air brakes actually end up being sort of my biggest mistake in the landing process. Here we are. So you'll see me. I'm trying to pitch it up at a 45-degree angle to try and lose as much speed as possible, but the weight is too far forward now for it to have the flight characteristics necessary to stick its nose up against the G-forces, because all of its lift is in the back. So the nose just wants to pitch forward into the prograde marker, and not, you know, so you see me there trying to brake or anything to try and lose the 2 kilometers per hour of speed that I have. And it's just, you know, I mean, everything starts heating up. So I'm pumping fuel as far back as I can, which later comes back to bite me, unfortunately. So yeah, you see me, I'm able to get the nose up, and I'm fighting and struggling, and Tomkin is doing his best, but all those heat gauges are still going up, because I think we're at still at 1.5 kilometers per second or whatever. Just cruising through the ultra high atmosphere, and we're coming down way too steep for this to be healthy. What I should have done is waited an orbit before I tried it, and tried to bring it down at a much more shallow angle, so that I could lose the necessary speed in the atmosphere without causing so much heat damage, because this thing took a ton of heat damage, and that may actually account for why the landing gear failed when it came down. But another design flaw with this vessel is that the landing gears and the engines are too far apart. So because I've got the landing gears close to where the center of gravity is, those rear landing gears are right about just under or just a hair behind the center of gravity. The problem with that, of course, is that the back of the plane is still there, quite a bit further back. So when she eventually comes down, she does not land softly. And you'll see it. It's a very unforgiving landing. However, the Ares Corporation, due to the fact that one of the landing gears failed in the process of that crash, they are also, much like the Drax Corporation, they are suspicious of foul play. Due to the abnormalities in the mission, they believe that someone tampered with the mechanics of their vessel prior to its launch, so that something would not function right. And as you can see, we're coming in way too high for the Kerbal Space Center. So you'll actually see it in the yeah, see, even there, I put the brakes all the way on because I want to try and get it to slow down and stop heating. But the heating effects are starting to lessen, even though we're about to hit the middle atmosphere and really start jarring. But that actually ends up helping us, because with all those air brakes sticking out on the back, the ship has a much better time at slowing down. So you can see that now that we hit the middle atmosphere just barely, it suddenly goes from heating effects to Mach effects as those air brakes just start catching like a sail and slowing us right the heck down. But we're way too high. So Tompkins starts planning for an approach from the opposite direction and kicks the engines back on in air breathing mode to go ahead and get the necessary thrust. So here we go as he cruises out to sea. Tompkins, wanting this flight to be over as fast as possible, pulls a rather dangerous maneuver of bringing the ship over and then nosing down to change the direction quickly. Of course, this drastically increased the horizontal speed of the craft as it transitioned from basically a straight dive. As you can see, he's getting really low, and we're starting to see the effects of the fuel issue again as we're coming into its landing, because suddenly the plane, more of the fuel's in the back than in front, and it's making the craft again unstable. This is definitely something that the Ares engineers hope to correct but are uncertain on how to correct. So there will probably be a number of iterations of the Hermes as new alternative designs are tested for their feasibility. In the meantime, we're looking at a good, strong approach. And I actually slow it down so you can see the crash as it happens at about 50% speed. Because it is a really interesting crash. But fortunately, Tomkin, being the awesome pilot that he is able to save it. I think, yeah, we're at like 270 meters off the ground, and he finally gets the landing gears down, because we actually had to try 2 or 3 times, which is what has led Ares to believe that there was some tampering involved with that. Sorry about that, I'm getting a drink out. But here you see it coming in nice and slow. However, it is a fairly high angle that it's coming in at. So, like, you know, Tomkin decides to deploy the air brakes because we're still moving pretty fast, and we're not coming down nearly enough. But you can tell that he's inexperienced because the amount of brakes that are on there is going to pull them right out of the sky. So you can see, yep, now the brakes have overcompensated, and now she's coming down well over a 30-degree angle. And there you can see it gets a good solid hit right on the back, breaking off the wings, the tail engines, and then the left landing gear cuts out. And there it is breaking. For some reason it actually passed through the runway is what happened. Which I don't know if that's a glitch with the adjustable landing gears. But as you can see, Tomkin puts her down and magnanimously is able to miraculously save the rest of the vessel for later recovery and investigation. And Tyugi is just happy to be alive. So, with all of the accusations of project tampering between the various companies and the infighting and complications that have developed, the remaining members of the J Casa have decided to push out the 3 competing companies, Drax, Ares, and Hexadyne, out of the Kerbal Space Center. So here we see Ares picking their new base, which I forget where it is. It's like on the far side of Kerbin, but they're laying down the flag for their claim. And I forget if I named the base in here, or if I just gave it whatever name I wanted. But we also have, of course, placed down bases for the other 2, and you'll see them planting their flags as well. But moving forward from this point, I have decided to do an episode for each group independently. And I'm setting up some rules for what, how much they're allowed to do on each turn as things evolve, because this is where things start to heat up, and we're going to start to see conflicting interests and the eventual transition from corporate competition to open warfare. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video and you will want to see how things evolve. And there's Hexadyne picking their base. The Drax, of course, took the KSC-2 as their new base. But I look forward to catching you on the next episode, and as we progress,